This is a prototype beer cozy. I've begun it with a circular cast on and then knit up, and the next step is going to be felting it. But one of the problems with double knitting in a small circle is it's very easy to overlook a mistake. And so in this case, I knitted a green stitch on the front, a green stitch on the back, and then green on the front again. So in other words, I missed out a white stitch here. Now, for this particular function, it doesn't matter at all, but it's a good opportunity to practice fixing mistakes, and there are a number of different ways that we could tackle this. The first quick option is a duplicate stitch, and if I were going to do that, I would start a little distance away from the stitch I want to cover. Try and lay the covering yarn on top of the yarn underneath, and then just copying the path of that stitch, take it off in the next direction. Then gently tension this stitch so it gives you the look you're after. I would do a little bit more work with the tails inside the work, and really that's a perfectly good fix for an occasional missed stitch or wrong coloured stitch. A slightly scarier and more drastic method that may give more impeccable results would be to actually cut away this stitch. So this stitch comes from here, up here and into this stitch, and then from here it crosses over to the other side. So if I cut it here, I leave the maximum tail on both sides. So I've got a little tiny green yarn tail there and a similar length yarn tail going to the other side of the fabric. Now, before I join that white column up and cover it, I would further reinforce those green stitches. Those tails are too small and would make me nervous. So I would actually might even remove this green stitch. So then I've got a decent length tail that can be darned in. So, and recreate that side green column. And now I'm going to follow the other tail to the front fabric. So that green is now replaced, and I've got two yarn tails there that can be neatened. Now on this side, I've tucked the needle through following that cut tail, and if I pull that up, I can see that I'm in the right place. So I can replace that stitch. And pull the tail out. So now I've got two yarn tails here that I can link and darn in. Two yarn tails here that I can link and darn in. And if I wanted to, I could push that back further. I'm not going to here. And now all that remains is to reconnect that column of white stitches. So I'm going to start a distance away. Actually, I'm going to start with a better angle. So I'm more to the giving the correct pull on this replacement white stitch. And so round the base of the one above it. And there we go. And I'm going to wait till I've done my green tails before I hide that white one. When I've got two tails in the same row, I like to link them around one another and then darn them in opposing directions. So that way the two stitches balance one another. The pull on the two stitches is equal and opposite. So I'm going to take this green tail back in this direction. And I could, if I feel like it, I could do a green duplicate stitch over here and then just lose the tail between the layers. And here's my other tail. And if I take this off in this direction, which is to balance the forces, I can probably split it when I take my white tail through there. So I can give it further security by splitting the plies when I take that white tail through. And so I might change to a sharper needle to get rid of that white tail. So I'm going off in that same general direction that I took the green tail, and chances are I've caught a little bit of it somewhere, further securing it. And make sure all the forces look, that looks good, and that came from far enough away, I'm not worried about that. So that's the tails on that side. And now again I've got two tails. I've got this little short one and I've got a fairly long one. So I'm thinking I might actually continue this, push this out one more stitch before I darn the tails in, and then this little tail will be quite sufficiently long. So I can follow it into the next stitch, pull the tail yarn out, follow it, and there we are. So I've now added an extra stitch worth to that tail length. And I'm going to go back to my sharp needle. So these need to go in the opposite direction to link them around one another, and now I can darn these in. Back inside, and I can duplicate a stitch here for extra security. Make sure I'm happy with the appearance of that stitch. And then I'll take this tail and I'll just sort of split the plies on the inside. It's a feltable wool, so that's not going to cause any problem. Now I'm actually going to felt this to shrink it down to become this a beer cozy, but and it really didn't require that level of fixing, but it's a lot easier to fix things than you might think. And I leave tails long and tuck them down inside between the layers.